Hi, everyone, and welcome to Lurking for Legends, a live videocast where my awesome co-host, epic fantasy author Richard H. Stevens and I speak with people from all walks of the publishing industry. Lurking for Legends is a live interactive broadcast, and we encourage viewers to chime in with their questions and for our guests, and to simply make comments on what you hear in the show. So tonight we have professional actor and audiobook narrator and many other talents, Mikhail Roberts. Welcome, Mikhail. How are you?
Welcome,
Hi,
Mikhail.
good evening. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here. So many authors are looking to get into having their books recorded as audiobooks. So I think we're going to have so much to talk about. So why don't you just start by telling us a little bit about you?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Timothy Mikhail Roberts. I go by my middle name. Tim Roberts is my dad. So like if you ever see me at a doctor's office and recognize me and you hear them say Tim, then you'll know why that is. Yeah, I go by my middle name, Mikhail Roberts. I started acting when I was like, maybe 13 or 14 years old. It's I don't know if it's an old story or a common story, but basically a TV crew came through my hometown filming a little thing, and they cast some local yokels, and I was one of the yokels. They got cast in what they were making, and I got bit by the bug, and that was the end for me. I knew that at the very least, the arts, that was it. Were always going to be some kind of creative profession. So I started doing that and went to college for it. I went to the University of Cincinnati, College of Conservatory of Music, where I majored in acting. And after graduating in 2008, 2008, I moved out to Los Angeles and pursued my career there, where I did a lot of indie stuff, and eventually I booked a gig that took me to Japan, and I did some acting there and been all over the place. And just recently, in the last couple of years, have started audiobook narrating and producing.
That's a lot of great stuff.
Yeah. I was like, abridge it, get to it. You're an actor. Get to the acting part.
So it says you were raised in Japan. How long were you in Japan?
Yeah, I was raised in Japan. I from the age of about 5 to about 10.
Wow.
Yeah, my mother and father had split, and my mother wanted me to have sort of an international experience and to be bilingual. And she was taking Japanese at the time, and she just thought, well, maybe I'll go to Japan. So she did, and she took me with her, and she was an English teacher in Japan, and I was just a student, just a kid, just going to public school. And I did that for 5 years, and I came back to the United States, to Iowa, and was a regular kid doing that, other than the fact that I grew up abroad. Regular in every other sense, though, for the most part.
Was it a bit of what were you going to say, Richard?
No, you go ahead. I was just gonna ask him, do you think that really added to your acting as far as broadening your knowledge of the world? Or
Yeah, I'm going to answer Christie's question. She was going to ask if it was a culture shock. I can
Yes.
tell, right? That's what you're going to
Yes.
ask. Yeah, I'm going to answer that, and then I'm going to answer Richard's question. Was it a culture shock? Absolutely. It was more of a culture shock coming back, though, to the U.S. When you're 5 to 10, you're pretty malleable, and just traveling is not as hard on a kid as you might think. It is, and there are some things. Maybe we'll get into it, maybe we won't. But if you're different and you look different and you behave differently, you will attract attention, both negative and positive. And that was my experience living in Japan. And I thought, moving back to the U.S., that the negative side of things wouldn't happen anymore. And oddly enough, I went from being the weird kid from another country to the weird kid who lived in another country. So that so the culture shock was, in a weird way, a lot more harsh coming back to the U.S., especially Midwestern America, which, respect to the Midwest, but at the same time, there wasn't a lot of diversity, we'll say that, in my hometown. So yeah. And then Richard's question was, did it affect my acting? Yeah, I think so. I didn't know I was going to be an actor, but living in other cultures, broadening your experiences in general, I think serves to enrich you as a human being. So that will help your writing, that will help your acting, that will help your worldview, and just make you more broad and eclectic. To at the risk of sounding like a complete pompous, you know, windbag. I don't mean to like inflate myself. I don't mean it that way. I just recommend it to anybody that wants to be an artist. I think you should travel. I think you should experience the world, especially cultures that are vastly different from your own.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you're a narrator, so you're forgiven for being a windbag because that's what you do. So
Yeah, I love the sound of my own voice. Yeah. And I've got the mic in front of me. It would be different if we were doing this and it was just a laptop or my my phone, but when I have the headphones and the microphone and I get into the into the narrator like sort of place, it's a narrator is a character on top. That's not necessarily me, that the narrate. I'm trying to be as much me as I can right now, but when I'm narrating, the narrator is a character for me, at least. I know it's not that for all narrators, but it is for me. And I think a lot about like, who is this narrator, even if it's just, an omniscient voice, like still, I think they should have an opinion about what they're reading.
Well, you know what I thought was really neat? You were about halfway through narrating Into the Madness, and you came across a scene that really moved you. And it was kind of a touching scene, an emotional scene. But I think you, as the narrator, I think you get more invested in the characters because you're trying to act them, so you're actually being the character. And then when something happened to one of the favorite characters, it really affected you. And you posted something on Instagram about that. I thought it was really cool.
Yeah, thank you. Yes. I don't know how to compare myself to other narrators, and maybe it's good that I don't. I don't know if I should or not. I do listen to a lot of audiobooks, and there was I listened to Robert Jordan's The Wheel of Time, finished by Brandon Sanderson, finished it, and it's one of my all-time favorite fantasy series of all time. And that's read by Michael Kramer and Kate Reading, and who are a married couple who narrate fantasy books together, which I think is just amazing. And they're very much my inspiration. Michael Kramer is like, I love his stuff. And there's in the last book, and I won't spoil anything for those of you who still aren't. I mean, there's 14 like 1,000-page novels. So anybody who's watching this who hasn't gotten to the last book, I will not spoil it for you because it is a lot of work. But that series started, I think, in the late 1980s. So like, catch up.
Yes. Yep.
Get on with it. But basically, something happens and a major character, bites it, and it was Kate Reading, actually, Reading. I think it's Reading. Even if it wasn't originally Kate Reading, I think she went with Reading because she's a narrator. It's funny. I think it's called Kramer Reading Narrations, I think, is the name of their company. They do amazing work. I love them. And she I could tell she was crying. I could tell she was crying when she was narrating when this character died. And because she had been with this character for a long time, and in many ways was her. Like, when I hear this character's voice in my head, it's Kate Reading. It's her, and it's so, in a weird way, you don't want the emotion of the scene, especially when you are being the narrator. You don't want it to get in the way of the storytelling, but at the same time, you want to do justice to the emotional truth of the moment. And if a character you love, I'm getting emotional talking about it right now. If a character specifically my experience with it in Into the Madness, if a character you love, or even two characters you love, you fear is something bad is happening to them, even if you know what's coming, maybe one of them's fine, maybe one of them's not, but when you get to that moment, I don't always know how to get by it without the recording. I'm crying on the recording. When you listen to it, if you get to that chapter, you'll know, because you'll hear. Right now, I have a very calm and assertive voice, and in that moment, I'm just like struggling through it. I don't know what the right answer is, but I do know that it's a gift when you get work that is so moving that you find yourself in that emotional state, we should all, as artists, like worship that moment. We strive for that humanity, so my philosophy, and it's not the right answer, my philosophy is, go broke or go home. Go, what was it? The Russell Crowe Gladiator. What is it the director said to him? Give me full snot. He's in the movie Gladiator. Again, spoilers, something terrible happens and he's crying. It's at the beginning of the movie. Okay, so like it's fine. But basically his family's slaughtered. And he just like drooling, snot just full. And it didn't feel forced, and it didn't feel, it didn't feel inauthentic. I watch that moment in that movie and I go, yep, that's about how that would feel for me too, yeah. So I'm of the philosophy, go for it. I know. Oh, thank you, CJ. CJ, that's very kind of you. Yeah. I say go for it. It's not everybody's philosophy. I know it's not everybody's philosophy. Some people are more objective and detached. And I know that there's so many things going on when you're recording or producing an audiobook, especially if you're a narrator producer. Some narrators are just narrators. They go in, they deliver, somebody else edits it. I have to edit my own stuff because I produce these audiobooks. So, there's a million things going through my brain, pardon me, about like the quality of it, and what's happening and how it's recording and how close am I to the mic, and oh, did something just pop in my ear just now? Like what, I'm a bunch of things are happening. So sometimes it's hard to get into a place where you're dialing in a performance. A lot of times you're thinking about the production of the audiobook more than you are the performance of it. You're just thinking about getting through the words without messing up most of the time, especially in the beginning. But once you get there, once you start really being able to multitask those things, you can do both well at the same time, I think. Yeah. Did I answer your question? I think I did.
No, you did awesome. And sorry, Christie, I'm not trying to monopolize Mikhail here, but
no.
I just want to let any authors that are listening, please don't just wait on us. Chime in with your questions, because that's what Mikhail's here to do, is to answer questions you might have about narration, and he'd be happy.
I'll try to keep it abridged as well. The answers. There are complicated answers and there are simple answers.
Yeah, until we get the questions, we'll just listen to it and be mesmerized by what Mikhail does. But we do have a question here from David Kelly. He says, Richard's characters was your favorite to narrate, and I guess why?
Oh boy, yeah, David, great question, and thank you for that. Well, I'm going to assume if you're asking, you're familiar with Soulforge Saga, and if not, get on that. But oh boy, they're all so good. They're all so good. There are some that are fun to narrate, and there are some that hurt. And like they're like, you just hope that you don't have to like go on a diatribe with this character somewhere down the line now that you've decided what their voice is going to be. So like for example, the character of Alhina is like, okay, here we go. You do not understand that which you are speaking about. Like, he's this almost Gandalf kind of guy. Well, Alhina likes to wax philosophical sometimes. And later on, Richard gifted me with a few chapters of uninterrupted monologue from this man, which was amazingly well-written prose. It was beautiful, beautiful prose, and it explained a lot of things in Soulforge universe. Everything like clicked, and a lot of fantasy novels have this moment. It happens in Harry Potter too. There's a Dumbledore like 3-chapter long, let me explain everything to you, Harry. So Alhina I love. Alhina hurts to do a little bit. I'm 35. Alhina's a lot older than that, many times older than that. But I love doing him because I like doing my best Sir Ian McKellen sort of impression with him. Olmar probably up there again. Another like low, growly guy, and we have some samples that we'll do here in a little bit. But Olmar's really fun, and the women,
you do so them.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that. I love doing Richard's women. That sounds so weird. I love narrating Richard's female characters. There we go. I got it.
You're gonna get me in trouble.
Yeah, I'm gonna get you in trouble because they're such. I'm actually a tenor in real life, and they're as far from me up as these bassy, growly characters are for me down. So I don't know. It's such a character for me, and I have like physicalities that happen too. Like if I'm doing Sadie, it's this sort of northern accent, and it's really high up. She's got a bit of a lisp, and she's sort of affable, and she's a bit of a jokester, and she's really great. And I love doing Sadie. Sadie's one of my favorites, and she is a direct whole cloth steal of the character of Daisy from Downton Abbey, and I absolutely adore doing that. So Sadie, Omar, Alhina, those are probably my three favorite. And then I throw in other celebrity impressions as sort of voiceover cameos as well. And I love those just as much. And even if they just come and go and that's it, you only see them, once. I love them all. I love all my children. Yeah. Ugh. I should just be like, it's Omar. My favorite is Omar. That's what I should just say. But I do love them all.
It does make a huge difference. You were talking about the two narrators for Robert Jordan's / Brandon Sanderson's Wheel of Time. And I love them too. They've done his Stormlight archives and they are fantastic. Yes. I just love them. I always buy the audiobook. And not just because it's long, a long read physically, but because they're so outstanding. And one of the things I've noticed is that when an audiobook narration is done really, really well, it's far better than reading the book yourself. So I find that especially, I don't know if you've really worked on humor yet, but I find that it's especially the case with fantasy, where you can really hear the accents and the voices and all the tension and stuff. And with humor, where it's a lot funnier with an audiobook narrator. I mean, it makes a world of difference. I wouldn't even like the book as much if I just read it. They really change the whole experience, in my opinion.
I would agree that sometimes when I'm doing my pre-read in my sort of homework of a book, that I find a joke when I'm narrating it that I didn't find when I was doing my pre-read, because just in my brain I'm just like, okay, but this happens. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, cool. What am I thinking for this guy? Okay, he's kind of like this. Okay, great. But I have to go through the pre-read because I got to get on with it. I got to get recording. I don't really know what it's going to be until I start saying the words. So once I get through the homework, which you have to do, and I start the narrating, I find you're totally right about humor. Like, jokes come out that you never even realized. And Richard has been kind enough when I've narrated for him, when something has happened and he said, I guffawed when you said, whatever line. And that feels good to get that affirmation and be like, okay, it was a joke. Okay, we got it. Good.
So when you mention doing your homework, this is something that I wanted to ask you anyway. I wasn't sure how. I've always wondered how that works. Do you have to read the whole book first? Do you read a scene and then just record it? How do you, what is your homework that you're doing?
So it depends on the book. So for Soulforge, I read the entirety of book 1 and all of Wizard of the North, and I started reading Into the Madness before I even began narrating Wizard of the North. For Light and Dark, which I'm doing now, I've just been going. Just started out and let's go. And I had a meeting with the author and we discussed the characters and we talked about what their voices would sound like. And I will read a chapter ahead most days after I'm done narrating. I'll read what am I recording tomorrow? Unless there's something profound in the plot that I need to know about and I need to get to this point. I need to get from A to B to Z or Z, depending on where you're from. By this point in the plot. But but most characters don't even know the journey that they're on. They don't know, they're not necessarily plotting to be doing XYZ at this point in the book. A lot of times the story is happening to a lot of characters. That said, sometimes there are characters who are plotters. It's important to do homework, especially for the plotter characters, because they need to have a duality to them, I think. Ideally. Yeah. So I think it depends on the book. Richard's prose is a little more classic fantasy, a little more heightened language, working with and yours as well, Christie, is a little more heightened, having read your stuff. But Light and Dark, for example, by Daniel Fife, his prose is much more sort of civilian, casual, pedestrian. There's the word. It's more, because it's modern. It's more of a modern fantasy. It's set in the right now, and in this world, and within this world exists this other hidden fantasy world. So it's kind of like in Harry Potter in that way, where it's like it can be a totally normal narrator sort of voice on top of everything, if that makes sense. So it requires a little less homework for at least the narration portion of it, because the language isn't as heightened, so it's easier to read. It's just easier to read. There it is. That's the answer.
David Kelly's wondering if you have a favorite voice in general sense, such as an actor.
Such as an actor. Oh boy. Yeah, I always try to put Kit Harington into everything that I narrate. I always try to put Kit Harington into it, and not just Kit Harington, Jon Snow, specifically his northern.
Right.
I always find a character. I basically made all of the Krakens like some version of Jon Snow, whether it be like 55-year-old Jon Snow or 30-year-old Jon Snow, basically, if you're talking about the father and son in the Emperor, both of the Emperor's Kraken from Soulforge. And it ended up working out because Sadie's from the north, and like all these other characters, this was complete just like kismet, where I gave a bunch of characters traditionally northern England style accents, and all of them ended up being from the northern part of the map in the fantasy world. So that was like a very happy accident. That was not homework, I will admit it. That was just me like shooting at the dark, and it all ended up working out. But yeah, Jon Snow. So I love to do like that low breathy thing down low. Yeah, good fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So how long do you spend at a time in the studio? I'm sure it depends on many factors, but what is the average time you can narrate in a day? I guess a lot of that depends on the voice you're narrating. If you're doing Elhina, it's probably about, what, 5 minutes?
I know, yeah. That's such a good question, CJ. Thank you. How long can you do it for? It depends on the day. It depends on my motivation. My fellow artists here on this panel can probably attest that there are days when you're not feeling it, even if you're really good at having a schedule and doing your thing, right? Christie, what do you find on your, like, you have a tolerance, right?
Yeah, typically you do have a tolerance, and like even when you want to, sometimes it's just not coming out right, and boy, you just have to stop. It's just not working.
Yeah. So sometimes today is not the day, right? And sometimes this is not the week or the month. Things aren't right. So sorry, I'm getting away from the question. When I'm recording, usually I'm able to do, oh boy, I record for about an hour and a half or 2 hours. And then I edit. And it's about 2 hours nonstop of going, which I understand is actually a large amount for many narrators. I didn't know that until I had been doing this for a little while. But I don't take any breaks. I basically just like go for that entire time. And then, and sometimes I have to take a break. Sometimes it'll be, I don't know, I'll be like 40 minutes in. I'm like, how many more pages is this chapter? 20? Okay. All right. Let's take a break. And usually I do like a chapter a day, or if they're short chapters, then I'll do like 2 or 3 chapters. I do it by chapters, not length of time in the booth. I like to kind of like just keep going until it's done. That said, I'm narrating book 2 of Light and Dark right now. And I love it. Some of these chapters, they're 25, 30 pages, like again and again and again and again and again, which is, again, amazing. But I'm starting to have to not even be able to do the whole chapter in a day, where I'll record like 75% of it in a day, and then come back the next day, finish the last 25%, and then edit it for the rest of the day, if that makes sense. Yeah. So I don't know, a couple hours of narration usually not more than 2. But that said, I have binge. I've done a couple of binge days where I just was in the booth for the entire day. It does happen. It does happen. When you're on, you're on.
So I notice when you read, and when I'm editing what you send me from the day before.
Yeah.
So I do the edits as well when we're doing a narration. So we go back and forth with these audiobooks, and you're pretty well verbatim. Once in a while, you'll change a word here or there, but it doesn't affect the text whatsoever. And I don't bother with it because it just flows quite nicely. But there are times where a word's either mispronounced or dropped or whatever, because that's the way people read. And is it a tough process to fix these little things that I send back to you, or because I know all of a sudden, if you're speaking, if you miss a word, all of a sudden there's a gap that you have to expand it. Is that something that the technology does for you, or how does that work?
It's not hard. It's not any more hard than any other recording, really. It can be emotionally sort of kind of a hit, because you take a pride in what you do, and then you get back, and you said this to me once, Richard. You said, don't sweat the edits, and that changed my whole outlook on it. When I started working with other authors, and they were giving me edits, and even changes, like not just something that I said incorrectly, or something like that, where they were like, oh, can you put a comma there, or actually let's change the order of these words around, because that's hearing that out loud, that sounds weird.
Mm-hmm.
So that does happen. And then I got the question from other authors where they're like, oh, I'm sorry, am I stepping on like your process here, like I'm not sure. And ever since you said that, it helped me to be more emotionally just kind of let it go, like it's just part of the process.
Yeah.
There's gonna be mistake. You're gonna make mistakes. The author's gonna make mistakes. The authors make heaps of mistakes, and they will be very grateful to you to let them know when you find a typo, or something.
Sure.
Yeah, like Richard's a big grammar guy, and so if the grammar is wrong, like you'll because sometimes we just speak with incorrect grammar. Like I'm probably doing this whole interview. And Richard is happy to let me know that I just, I flipped this verb and noun around, and it's just how I normally speak, and my brain just does it. And no, you just fix it. It's fine. At first I took issue with myself having not done it perfectly. But now I just forgive it, because we're all humans, and it's a better product at the end of the day for all of us. And now I take pride in that. When I get to come back and it's like, oh yeah, no, let's make it better, and if it's worth doing, it's worth doing right, I guess. Yeah.
And
Does that answer the question? Yeah.
No, certainly. And Christie, she's done a couple of live reads with me as well. And I know when we read our text or someone else's text, we don't always read it verbatim, like you say. We read it the way our mind wants, thinks it makes sense. And generally that doesn't affect the meaning of the sentence, but sometimes it does. So everybody does it. And,
yeah.
But if you're looking at a professional product, then, it's got to make sense anyway.
Yeah. So, and sometimes I go back and because I do a listen through as well, obviously, after I've recorded and done my edits on my end. And I go, like, that is, it's not even that I switch words around. Sometimes that is not a word. I don't know what that was, but that was not. And I missed it when I was doing. I didn't realize that my brain stopped working for 1/2 of 1 second, and I just mushed together a bunch of syllables that don't make any sense. So I don't know. It's just a thing. Yeah. Ooh, good question, David. How long does it take to narrate a full novel? It varies with length, of course, but maybe a ballpark figure is the question. Thank you. That is a great question.
Probably depends, because Richard's are like 130,000 words.
Yeah.
And
No,
mine are like 50,000.
yeah. So that's a great question. Well, we'll make this a two-part question. So I'll answer, and then I'm gonna punt this back out to Christie and Richard and ask you how long it takes you to write a novel generally. And I know that varies upon the author and how often they can write and all of that. So I'll go first. I'll do the TikTok thing. How long does it take to do? I'll go first. To narrate. So it takes about so there's a word called phrase called per finished hour. So per finished hour of audiobook, if say the audiobook ends up being 10 hours long, per each of those finished hours, there's an amount of work that goes into it. For me, and it's been getting better as I do it, it's about 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 to narrate per hour. And then it's about anywhere from 3-to-1 to 7-to-1 to edit sometimes. So if I'm putting out an hour, it can take anywhere. So what did I say? 2-to-1, and let's say best case scenario, it'll be 2-to-1 to narrate. So 1 hour, that's 2 hours then narrating. And then let's say I was really, really efficient with my edit. That's 3 hours. So 5 hours to punt out an hour of finished narration. Does that?
Yeah. And how long would that narration be? Like, would that be 10 pages? I know you can't quantify that properly, but
no, I actually can now. I've been doing it long enough. For me, and it, again, font size and all of that
Right.
kind of thing, but generally about an hour is about 10, 11, 12 pages, maybe. Yeah, 11 or 12 pages. And it's weird, as the chapter goes on, you speed up and slow down too, like it fluctuates. And like if there's dialogue and there's a lot of stickamithia where it's one character, the next character, the next character, and it's back and forth and bop, then pages are just flying by, so. But yeah, about, I don't know, 45 minutes for 10 pages, something like that. Does that sound right to you, Richard, based on what I gave you? I think so. I think it's about 45 minutes per 10 pages.
Yeah, I would have no idea. I know when you send me the edits back the next day, you're very efficient. You send me 1 or 2 chapters a day, and so that always takes the morning coffee off. But
well, I just sent in a chapter that was an hour and 20 minutes, and I believe it was 23 pages. So I guess, yeah, hour 20 minutes. So there. Does that answer it?
No, that's fine. And
how long does it take you to write?
that could take forever. There is no answer to that. Like you say,
a lifetime. Yeah.
Some days I can bang out 3,000 to 4,000 words. Some days I might be lucky to get 500 words, and you don't know how long that stretch will last, depending on what's going on in the world or how you're feeling or what's pulling at you. So I can probably put out maybe 300,000 word books a year now. That's what I've been doing for the last couple of years.
Yeah.
So I go by that, I guess. I'm not sure about Christie, but I know Christie, I do this full time. So Christie, you have an editing business you got to run full time. So your writing time is a lot more limited than mine.
It is. Yeah. I had beginner's luck with my first novel, and I wrote that and had it edited and proofread and published within a year's time, which is not typical for me. I found out later, short stories are much, much faster. Of course, sometimes I can write them in one day and they're good to go. And sometimes it'll take a few months to really get it right and do a few drafts. It does definitely depend on, and I'm a pantser, so that doesn't help anything. Just as I go along, things change. And this third book is the longest I've taken to put out anything. It's been years. And it's because everything I thought it was going to be is utterly different. It needs to be totally flipped on its head. It's messing me up. Like, it's so messing me up. So, luckily in the meantime, I've been able to put out these short stories, which take a lot smaller, but also keep in mind a shorter time, but also keep in mind I'm writing historical fiction. So there's a lot of research involved in that too. So it's like multiply the writing time.
You have like letters and things that when I was reading your stuff, I thought that was so great, is the letters and the decorum and the politesse between these characters, the way they have to talk to each other, and the social expectations and there's a lot. I was like, oh, this is dense. Like, yeah, this is short for a novel, but it is packed full of goodies.
Yeah, it is. I definitely try to keep myself fast paced, especially for historical fiction. It's kind of a genre known to be a bit long winded. So I prefer to do the opposite. I like historical suspense and keep it fast, always moving. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
While I have the microphone.
No, go.
No, go ahead. Actually, no.
I was going to ask you about it. I was going to ask you, when do you find that in reading and in writing historical fiction that the devil's in the details? Obviously, you're kind of already saying that. Do you find that it would trip you up to tell a fast-paced story if you like got some of the details wrong? Like, as a reader, you would get hung up on it, maybe? Like, wait a minute, hang on, and then all of a sudden it takes you out of it? Or like, what is obviously you want to get it right because we can look up history, but from a narrative standpoint, what's the impetus to get it right, other than just getting it right because it's history? Is there?
Well, yeah. So one of the most difficult things in any writing is always to not do any kind of info dumps because you like the information or because you thought of it. And of course, you're proud that you came up with it, whatever it is. It's very easy to just pour that onto a page and not take it out. But you really ideally want to include only what's necessary to the reader, what's going to be interesting to them. So with historical fiction, of course, it's so easy to put in way too much. And I am actually most people are overwriters and they have to trim down their work, and I'm the opposite. I'm an underwriter and I have to add to it. So like with the details, I'm really adding in the stuff. I'm trying to be very natural about it instead of adding in a whole lot of details that are just like, look at all this research I did, or let me tell you a bit about the time period. It's really just as if this was your everyday life and you're walking into a room that you're used to. Of course, I'm not going to describe it in utter detail. You're going to see it as I go through it. So I think that's really important. Not everyone agrees, but I definitely think it makes all the difference between moving along quickly. And of course, that's harder in fantasy where you need the world building. People want to see, what does that world look like? It's a whole other thing. But
when I open that book, I want to see a map at the front.
That's right. Exactly.
So speaking
that's a great question.
Speaking of fantasy worlds, I think we should treat everybody to a sample of Mikhail actually narrating a piece of a story, and this is what goes through it. And I know it's difficult that you're actually doing it live, where you can't stop and go back and forth. So on the spot here.
I'm happy to do it. And I'll preface it by saying that normally what I would do is I would just start recording. And then when I make a mistake, I have a little clicker here, and I will spare your ears, and I'm not going to do it into the mic. I'll cover it up and I'll do it. And you can probably hear me do that. So I click it into the mic, and that creates a spike on the wave that I can see in the editing program. And that indicates to me that I have made a mistake. And what I will do is I will read up until I see that click, and then I will jump past it to that. So I'll go back to that section where I restarted and grab the next section. I won't even listen to the thing that I messed up, and I'll just grab the next section, just bring it in there. And that's how I kind of stitched it all together. That's how I used to do it. I'm moving into a new way now, where I literally just hit record, because now I have everything right here around me. I can hit record, read, and then if I mess up, stop, go back to where I messed up and pick it up from there. But as with all things, you get better as time goes. So if I mess up, I'll probably just plow through. I won't click. And I won't go back. I'll try not to. Yeah. All right. Now, give me a moment here. So I have to get in a narrator voice too, which you'll notice is going to be different from my normal speaking voice, because this is the narrator voice from Into the Madness as well. All right.
Alhina stepped forward on his own, his staff radiating a strong orange light. He studied the passageway before facing the others. You are about to enter the crypt. Many have stumbled into these hollowed halls, not appreciating where they trod. But if we can believe the operator, only two have ever come back out alive. Him and me. His magnanimous voice dropped. Whether the necromancer is alive or not is another story. Facing the prospect of something as daunting as the crypt, Alhina's words did little to enhance anyone's courage. Sadira and Lorena walked up beside Alhina and peeked into the gloom, while Pollard and Omar backed away. "You sure about this, Pops? It's a bit dark in there for me liking. We best be camping here tonight and going in the morn." Omar's eyes looked anywhere but into the crypt. Alhina smiled. "It will not be any lighter inside the crypt come the morrow." Pollard shuffled back and forth on the balls of his feet. "Perhaps we should climb over the mountain." "Climb over the mountain?" Alhina's eyes followed the rock face into the mist. "Do you know how high that mountain is? We would never make it. Even if we did, how would we find the pass?" Sadira stepped up to the giants, pointing a finger at them. "I see what's going on. You're afraid." When they didn't respond, she laughed. "You are! Big and mighty Pollard and ferocious Bear Omar are afraid. Well, I'll be a pickled badger. I never thought I'd see the day." Omar shuffled his feet, his cheeks reddening. He lowered his gaze, looking anywhere but at Sadira. "There be ghosties in there, Sadie. I ain't exactly caring for ghouls and their ilk." "Have you ever seen one before?" "Aye." He glanced at her, but turned away again. "Maybe not seen one, exactly, but sure as I'm a whelp of a tart, I's heard 'em several times in the Underrealm. You were there." "You mean the voices? Those weren't ghosts, you big lunkhead. They were the Voil, remember?" Omar swallowed. His bushy brow twitched, but he remained quiet. "Rena, take Freddy Cat's paw." Oh, and who's this? This is Sadira. Okay, here we go. Going back. Say then I would do a little click here. Click, and then I'd go back. "Rena, take Freddy Cat's paw, and I'll grab the big oaf." Sadira clapped Pollard's hand and tugged, her weight unable to move him. "Come on, you big lummox. Sadie'll keep you safe." Pollard's sheepish face flushed as he followed the petite archer into the crypt. Rook didn't think Omar would follow, but the helmsman's eyes tracked Pollard and Sadira and then fell on Alhina. "All right, but mark me words, lassie. If a ghostie comes a-calling, don't be looking to Omar to be saving ya." Yeah, let's go. I hear ghosts like to sneak up on people from behind." Lorena winked at Rook. Omar's pace increased. He overtook Alhina, and then Pollard and Sadira. Lorena barely managed to hang on to him. Woo! Oh, pressure.
I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed that so much. And you kind of like answered one of my questions that I've always had, never been able to ask anybody, which is, do you read straight through or do you have to like stop for different characters? And I can't get over how you just switch so fast between them. I don't know how you do it.
Yeah.
Something.
It depends. It does depend. Some days you just can't get a character. Like thank you, David. Thank you. Some days you can't get a character. They're just unobtainable, and you're just doing take after take after take after take, trying to get that voice. And thank you, CJ. But ideally, yes. The ideal is kind of what I just did, is to just start, go, and if you make a mistake, then you just go back, pick up where you made a mistake, keep on going, and honestly, the better and the more polished the performance can be in the read, the less editing you have to do, and editing always takes more time than reading. So if you can in fact, if you're trying to like take a little sound out or something sounded funny, and this is advice to any producers out there, or if you're looking at narrating an audiobook yourself, my advice to you would be, rather than sitting there and fiddling with the edit, trying to get, the timing right or whatever, just take the line back, just record it again. I promise you it takes less time to just say it again. Yeah. Or if there's a noise and you're trying to mess with the settings and the EQ to try and get rid of that just record the line again.
So I would imagine that a tough thing to do is when you're doing the edits, when you got to replace a line, is you're into the scene and you've done pages after page and your voice is a certain way, and then when you go to edit it, it must be very hard to get, unless you're doing a character, but even as a narrator, to get the actual feel of the voice that you had when you were reading at that time, because we just naturally speak a little higher, a little lower, whatever.
Yes.
A little faster, lower.
No, that's a great point, and a great sort of observation about it's kind of like your mental state. It's the same thing. Sometimes you're in the state to write or paint, and your voice is an instrument like anything. It's a muscle. Sometimes you're feeling like going for that jog in the morning. Sometimes you can do it. Sometimes you do it, but it's a little slower. And so yes, you're in different places sometimes, but that is now why I stand by having done a narrator voice is it actually gives me a note to hit on the scale, if that makes sense. Because my narrator,
I can just drop into the narrator voice anytime I want. And then if I'm doing a character, then drop back into the narrator voice.
I know where it sits, so I can just kind of like hit it, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
whereas if it's just me, sometimes it's harder to go from me to a character than it is to go from narrator, which is a character voice for me, to another character. Those are easy to jump between for me. It's harder to like go from Mikhail the person to, the bubbly, mischievous Archer Sadira without like going like, hang on, what is she? How does she? And also all of these characters live together in the same world. And once you get a feel for how they interact, like, as soon as Omar is complaining about something, Sadie's going to be right on him about it. And then Alhina's going to be like, hey, it's not a big deal, and then Lorena's going to get in on it and be like, oh, come on. She's also going to poke fun. And then finally, Rook or Pollard will come in and be like, guys, stop it. Like there's a way these characters banter, and you start to be able to read an author probably the same way that a musician will be familiar with a composer. They'll be like, oh, I'm doing Brahms, so now I know that there's going to be motifs here, and there's going to be there's going to be something familiar. Does that make sense?
Very much so. And
yeah, you have a vocabulary as an author. So once I start doing your stuff, I'm like, I know how these guys are going to interact. I know their relationship.
I know we're getting near the end of the time here. Actually, we've gone over, but that's great because we enjoy having you here.
My.
One last thing I wanted to say was I find it amazing because in the Soulforge universe, as in any fantasy story, there are so many characters that will come and go through the story. And there are a lot of main characters. Like when you read other books, other genres, there's generally one or two main characters and that's it. But in fantasy, you seem to have 5, 6, 7 main characters, which, kind of boggles the mind. But you know the voices, and you like every time you get to a character you haven't seen for a long time, like if Averick came in, well, I guess you don't have Averick in the story, but if one of the characters came in the story and you hadn't read for maybe half a book, you know his voice. Do you have these written down somewhere, or do you have like tape of that voice, or how do you remember that thing?
Oh boy, we should play a really fun game really quick. The answer is that they're kind of just in my brain. And once you've kind of flushed out a character, you hopefully can go back to them, unless it's been a really long time. Oh boy, Keen. I had to. I was like, when I came back to do Into the Madness, I couldn't remember right away. I was like, what was I doing for Keen again? And so I did have to like go back and listen to a bit of my own recording to go, oh, this is what I'm doing. What does help, and I recommend this to anybody narrating, make Instagram videos of your characters and do character highlights, because then you have a record that's out there that you can just go scroll through and and it's also fun, and it'll help build your your brand and whatever you're doing. Yeah. But ooh, David, I have an old BBC audiobook of Asimov's Foundation trilogy that has some weird ambient music sound in the background. Do you ever do that, or would you recommend against it? That's such a good question. That is such a good question. So it depends. It depends. ACX, which is the company that I work with, to get it's where authors find narrators. Basically, it's a forum in which we can find each other. They recommend against it. But that said, you will find audiobooks on Audible, where you find that, and a lot of them do it through ACX. But that said, there are a lot of publishing houses that do this, and they have a budget for for a soundtrack and ambient music and multiple actors and all of that stuff. So if you're just starting out and getting a narrator, or if you're considering narrating your own work, I would say keep it simple. Try and do everything. Just try and do everything just you and the words on the page, and keep it simple. Because once you add music, unless you have the express permission of the author, you're really starting to change it by adding music and all of that. And it can be lovely, but it can also be maybe not a great fit. I don't know. Yeah, it does exist though. I've heard it too. Yeah. But these people have big publishing deals, and it's been discussed for, I imagine, hours and hours and hours before any of that's decided. Yeah.
Nice.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So Christie, just before we sign off, do you have anything else you wanted to add before? I know we could talk to Mikhail for hours on end, and
we should do it again.
We'll definitely want you back on here to do this again for sure. But
yeah.
Anything you want to ask, Christie, before we leave?
If I could just ask one smallish question. I don't know what's actually a small question, what's not. But have you ever had the opportunity yet, and I know you will if you haven't already, to do some kind of like a more fantastical accent that is not necessarily something that's out there already, like a British accent or something, where you're doing something fantastical? And I'm kind of thinking of like even making something up, like if in Star Trek: The Next Generation, Deanna Troi ended up making up sort of an accent, and she called it like a mix of Eastern European and Israeli. And I was wondering if you've ever had to do something like that.
I've got a problem that I need a neat actress accent. So
that's a fantastic question. That's a fantastic question. My answer is this: unless you're doing historical fiction, my assumption is, even if it sounds like kind of a northern accent or kind of a British accent or whatever, and if you don't speak that dialect normally and perfectly already, I kind of just bunked my mic. I kind of just shove it in the realm of like, this is a fantasy accent. Now it is in the general ballpark of British and all of that, but oh boy. Have I done something fantastical? No, usually mine are grounded in some kind of real world dialect. I haven't yet run out of voices using those dialects. Once I get to a point where I'm like if it is an alien, if I get a chance to do some sci-fi, which I really hope I get to, I will definitely come up with brand new dialects, and you just choose a few sounds that always sound this way, right? So like maybe all of their THs are always Ds, or maybe all of their E sounds are always and you just always make that change. You actually have to go into there's an actual alphabet for it called the International Phonetic Alphabet, which is great for notating how to do any dialect or accent. They have logged in an alphabet form with using various symbols every sound that we know that human beings make. IPA, International Phonetic Alphabet. And I know it, and people study it, and people study it in college and acting school and all of that. And it's a powerful tool for doing exactly what you ask, which is creating something out of nothing. If you want to create an accent, you can do just that. You can just go start crossing off consonants and vowels and replacing it with the sound, the phonetic sound that you want it to be, and you just practice it and do it. In theory, that's how it works.
That's really cool. Wow, I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. Or you just do it until you find it too. Obviously there's a realm where you just shoot at the wall and see if something sticks.
Yeah.
Okay, so just before we go, Mikhail's narrated a couple of my books. He's going to be narrating my Bainbridge Companion box set story. So it's a trilogy. He's going to be all in one audiobook because length is always better for audio buyers. The minimum I think most audio people are looking for are 10 hours. So you always want to make sure that your book is more than that. Otherwise, a lot of times they'll just pass you by. But this is reviews are so hard to get, and Christie knows that, and so is Mikhail and myself. And as artists, we put a lot of work in these things, and generally reviews that people get, it's hard to motivate people to leave a review. So we've got a few reviews that are coming in now, and we're still trying to work the people to get more reviews. But this is one that came in. I just want to read about Mikhail. So it says Roberts' narration was incredibly well done, regardless of this being what appears to be his first audiobook, and that was Wizards of the North. And that's your first audiobook, was it not?
That was, yeah. I got sleuthed. They figured me out. I was found out.
Once I heard the audio sample, I knew it would be an easy listen. His character voices are distinct, varied, and memorable, and do not even require the text to state who is speaking. And that's what I found very magical about your narration is, like, you can sit back without reading the book and that's Sadie speaking, that's Omar speaking, that's Pollard. Like, Pollard's got such a distinctive voice. And that's the highest praise.
That's the highest praise I could possibly ask for.
And dang, his dialect work is excellent. He is a slow burn style of narration, tasting the words, allowing Stephen's profoundly human characters, rich setting, and amazing story to shine through, leaving just enough space to let the listener process the wonderfully complete world of Soulforge. But it clearly isn't because Roberts can't narrate quickly. It is a clear and deliberate stylistic choice for when the action picks up, Roberts can burn through the text like a machine gun speed. Oh, with machine gun speed. See, I need your clicker there. And deadly accuracy, simulating the experience of getting to the juicy page-turner portion of any well-written fantasy novel. And so, that's very high praise. And we don't know this. I don't know this person at all. This is someone who's left a review for Wizard of the North, and they went on. See, they had about 3 paragraphs of the stuff. So you really left.
That was very kind. That was very kind of them. My goodness. Wow. Thank you. Wow.
No, I think you need to hear that, and you certainly deserve that. So
I read it, but it's different to hear someone else read it out loud.
For sure, yeah,
yeah.
You're humble and you kind of take the praise with a humility, but it's certainly nice to be appreciated. But anyway, thank you for coming on this week. We certainly appreciate having you, and we certainly want to get you back because we could talk to you for hours. And so next week's guest is Nicole Conway, and she's a fantasy author who also runs her own cover design business. And I can truthfully say I love her covers because I have a couple of them coming up in the next couple of years, along with some interior artwork that she's done for me. And Nicole's an international bestseller author of the Dragon Rider Chronicles, Dragon Rider Legacy, and Dragon Rider Heritage series. And the following week on May 4th, and we're still looking for 2 slots to fill here. I thought this would fill up real quick. We've got a reader panel coming up on Lurking for Legends, and we're going to entertain our first reader panel, which we invite authors to ask the readers about subjects. What do they like about certain genres? What tropes are overdone? What would they like to see in future novels, etc.? So we get the chance for us authors to pick the brains of actual readers. And I think that'd be an interesting switch as to interviewing authors instead of the readers. So that'll be a great show too. And so until then, again, thank you, Mikhail. Christian, I'd like to wish everyone a safe and happy week ahead. And please take care. And I always do this, and I leave myself hanging because I got to hit the end broadcast button. I got to find it first. Take care. We'll see you next week.
Bye.